that sprouts and so forth are constantly produced and there is never a time when they are not produced, because of being produced by a permanent cause. Assertion, their production depends on other factors. Answer, then it follows that time, too, is an effect, for the intermittent production of sprouts is governed by other factors, being dependent on conditions like heat and moisture. We do not assert that time is non-existent, for it says, if proponents of time as a cause accept it as such, they should also accept it as an effect. Without the effect it produces, a cause lacks that which establishes it as a cause, for the establishment of a cause depends on its effect. Thus, since it follows that all causes must be effects, one should not accept causes that lack effects. Anything accepted as a cause should be accepted as facilitating an effect.
A cause such as a seed acts as the cause of something else such as a sprout, through a change from before in its potency. Any functional thing which changes so that its former and later moments are unalike should not be called permanent. Thus one should not accept permanent time and so forth as causes. If one does not accept that time, too, changes, it follows that a functional thing, such as a sprout whose cause is unchanging permanent time, has come about of its own accord because of being produced by a cause that has not come into being. Whatever happens by itself cannot have a producing cause, since its dependence on a cause is inadmissible. How can functional things such as sprouts be impermanent? It follows that they are not, because of being produced by that which is permanent. This entailment follows because cause and effect are never seen to have incongruent characteristics in that one is permanent and the other impermanent. Vaisesika assertion, permanent particles of the four elements activated by the force of karma form the substantial entity of a composite, producing the environmental world and so forth.
Answer, that is incorrect, for it follows that when particles coalesce and form a composite, an increase in size is impossible if there is total interpenetration. If some parts coalesce, those that do are causes while those that do not are not causes. It therefore follows that the smallest particle has parts, because some of its sides are causes, while others are not. Being multifarious, it follows that it cannot be a permanent functional thing because of having diverse parts. Assertion, although particles interpenetrate completely because they are partless, a separate accretion of coalesced particles forms, which produces the composite.
Answer, it follows that it is not feasible for particles to interpenetrate completely when composites form. If they merge completely, there will be no gradual increase in size from the first to the second composite and so forth. Also, the causative sphere with the characteristic of appearing to the mind as partless and spherical is not present in the resultant substantial entity, the composite. Where complete interpenetration does not occur, one particle's position will not be asserted as also that of another. Thus, since the causal particles and resultant composite are not asserted to be equal in size, the absurd consequence that the composite is not an object of the senses is avoided. Nevertheless, since particles have parts, their consequent unfeasibility as permanent functional things remains. Assertion, the problem of their having parts occurs when the resultant substantial entity is forming, but prior to that the smallest particles do not have parts.
Answer, that is incorrect. If a particle has no sides, it cannot be surrounded by particles on its four sides. If it has sides, such as an eastern one, it definitely must have parts, since any particle with an eastern side must also have an eastern part. For that reason, any opponent who holds that particles have sides prior to the formation of a composite admits those particles are not partless ones, because of accepting that they are located within the 10 boundless directions. It follows that such particles would not move from one place to another. When a thing moves from one place to another, its front takes up a position ahead while its rear relinquishes the rearward position, but partless particles neither take up nor relinquish a position. If it is asserted that they do not move, it is contradictory for partless particles to form the substantial entity of a composite. Thus, truly existent particles should never be accepted. Assertion, permanent particles do exist because adepts perceive them by virtue of the divine I.e.
Answer, what adept sees such a permanent particle? Seeing it is not feasible because such a form, a particle which firstly has no front, nor any middle, and finally does not have a rear portion, is not evident to any kind of perception. Assertion, since coarse things would have no cause if particles did not exist, particles do exist and, moreover, are permanent because of being causeless functional things. Answer: it follows that causal particles are not permanent, for just as the seed changes and disintegrates when the sprout is produced, the causal particles are destroyed by the production of the resultant composite. Objection: this is not established, for they produce a separate effect without giving up their causal identity.
Answer: alternatively, since the presence of the causal particles in a place precludes that of the resultant composite, it follows that they are not cause and effect because of being simultaneous and occupying individual positions, like a pot and a woolen cloth in their respective places. For the following reason too, particles are not permanent. Particles are obstructive in that they cannot be penetrated completely by other particles. That which is obstructive cannot be permanent. The reason why Buddhas never say that permanent particles exist is because they do not perceive obstructive permanent things. Siddhamatrans, who refute the existence of particles by applying the reasoning of ultimate analysis but assert that consciousness is truly existent, should accept objects and consciousnesses as they are conventionally accepted, since exactly the same reasoning applies.